The morning sun filtered gently through the tall windows of the Montgomery estate, pouring golden light across the polished marble floors. The house stood on the edge of the countryside, where the hum of the city faded into the soft whispers of rustling trees. It was the kind of mansion that seemed to breathe wealth: wide hallways, grand chandeliers, and a kitchen bigger than most apartments. Inside, the faint aroma of freshly baked bread lingered in the air. The staff had already left after preparing breakfast, and the house was unusually quiet. Ethan Montgomery, a man in his early 50s with neatly combed silver hair and calm blue eyes, sat alone at the kitchen table. He had been reading the morning paper, a half-empty cup of coffee beside him. Once, this kitchen had echoed with laughter, his wife humming by the stove, his young son asking endless questions. But those days were long gone. His wife had passed away years ago, and his son had left for the city, chasing his own dreams. Ethan had everything money could buy, but not the warmth he once had. A faint sound broke the silence. A soft creak. Ethan lifted his head. He listened closely. Another sound, this time a shuffle, light and hesitant, coming from the pantry door. He stood slowly, careful not to make a noise, and walked across the kitchen. When he turned the corner, he froze. There, standing on tiptoe near the counter, was a small girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. Her clothes were worn and dusty, her hair tangled. In her trembling hands, she clutched a loaf of bread, eyes darting toward the back door as if planning her escape. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan's deep voice broke the stillness. "What are you doing here, little one?" The girl gasped and stepped back, clutching the bread tighter to her chest. Her eyes widened, big, frightened brown eyes. I'm sorry," she stammered. "Please don't call the police. I was just hungry." Ethan looked at her closely. She couldn't have weighed more than 60 pounds. Her cheeks were pale, her shoes torn at the edges. He softened his tone. "What's your name?" She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lily." "Lily," he repeated gently. "Are you alone?" She bit her lip and looked down. "My mom's sick. We haven't eaten since yesterday. I just wanted a little bread." Her tiny voice cracked on the last word. Ethan's chest tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he sighed, a deep, weary sound, and motioned toward the kitchen table. "Sit down," he said quietly. Lily froze, unsure if this was a trick. Are you gonna call someone?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I'm going to make you breakfast." Lily's eyes filled with confusion as she sat cautiously on the edge of the chair. Ethan washed his hands, rolled up his sleeves, and began working. He cracked a few eggs into a pan, butter sizzling as it melted. The smell of toast soon joined the air. Lily watched him silently, her hands still gripping the bread. After a while, Ethan glanced over his shoulder. "You can put the bread down now," he said with a small smile. "I think we'll have plenty." She blushed and set it gently on the counter. When the food was ready, scrambled eggs, toast, and a glass of milk, Ethan placed the plate in front of her. She stared at it as though it might disappear. Then, with small, careful bites, she began to eat. Slowly, Ethan said softly, "There's more if you need it." Lily nodded, tears welling up as she chewed. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt something stir inside him, not pity, but a quiet ache, a memory of what it meant to care. When she finished, Lily wiped her mouth shyly. "Thank you, sir. I didn't mean to steal. I just didn't know what else to do." Ethan folded his hands on the table. "Where do you live?" "In the old trailer park, near the river," she said. "It's cold there now. The roof leaks when it rains. And your mother, she's sick, real sick. She can't work no more." Lily's voice wavered. "I tried to get food before, but people yell at me. They say I'm a thief." Ethan looked out the window, the morning sun glinting on the garden pond. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he stood and went to a small cabinet by the fridge. He pulled out a basket and began filling it: fresh fruit, bread, milk, a few cans of soup. Lily watched, wide-eyed. "You'll take this home," he said gently. "And tomorrow, you'll come back here. You can help me with the garden, and I'll make sure you both have enough to eat." Her lips parted in disbelief. "Really?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Really, but on one condition." She tilted her head. "What?" He leaned closer. "No more stealing. You ask, and I'll help." Lily nodded quickly, her small hands clutching the basket. "I promise." Over the next few days, Lily returned to the mansion. She helped water the plants in the greenhouse, carried tools for Ethan, and swept the porch. Though her hands were small, she worked hard, humming quietly as she moved. Ethan found himself looking forward to her visits. The once silent house began to feel alive again. He would tell her stories about his travels, about how he built his business from nothing. In return, she would tell him about her mother, about school, and about how she loved drawing flowers in her old notebook. Sometimes, when Ethan was reading by the fireplace, Lily would sit nearby, sketching with a pencil he'd given her. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the windows, Ethan said, "Lily, how's your mother doing?" Lily's face fell. "She's getting weaker. The medicine costs too much." Ethan was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "Would you take me to see her?" The trailer park sat on the edge of town, near a stretch of overgrown grass and rusted fences. The air smelled faintly of rain and old metal. When they arrived, Lily led him to a small trailer, its paint chipped, the door hanging slightly crooked. Inside, a woman lay on a thin mattress, her face pale, her breathing shallow. She tried to sit up when she saw Ethan, but he gently waved her down. "Please, don't get up," he said kindly. "I'm a friend of Lily's." The woman managed a weak smile. "You must be the man she talks about. The one with the big house." Ethan chuckled softly. "I suppose that's me." He looked around the tiny space, a few blankets, an empty medicine bottle, a broken heater in the corner. His heart ached at the sight. After a long pause, he said, "I can help you, if you'll let me." The woman frowned slightly. "Help us? Why?" Ethan glanced at Lily, who stood clutching her mother's hand. "Because your daughter reminded me that kindness isn't a transaction. It's a duty." Tears glimmered in the woman's eyes. Over the next week, Ethan arranged for a doctor to visit, paid for new medicine, and hired workers to repair the trailer's roof. He even made sure they had enough food to last through the winter. But more than that, he visited often. He'd sit with Lily's mother on the porch, sipping tea and talking about life, while Lily chased butterflies in the grass. Months passed. The air grew warmer, the trees greener. Lily's mother slowly regained her strength. She began walking again, her smile returning little by little. One afternoon, Ethan received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a drawing, carefully colored with pencil and crayons. It showed a little girl, her mother, and an old man with silver hair standing together in front of a big house, with flowers all around. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for giving us back hope." Ethan smiled, his eyes misty. He placed the drawing on the mantel, right beside an old photograph of his late wife. The years went by quietly after that. Lily continued visiting the mansion, helping in the garden, and learning to paint. Ethan enrolled her in art classes, insisting she had a gift. Her mother found part-time work, and soon they moved into a small but cozy apartment nearby. On Lily's 12th birthday, Ethan surprised her with a sketchbook and a set of watercolors. "Every good artist needs the right tools," he said with a grin. Lily threw her arms around him. "You're like the grandpa I never had." He laughed softly, holding her close. For a man who once lived surrounded by silence and wealth, he had finally found something money could never buy, the quiet joy of being needed. Years later, when Ethan grew older and frailer, it was Lily who came to visit him. She was a young woman now, studying art at a nearby college, her eyes still as bright as that frightened little girl's the day he caught her stealing bread. One afternoon, as they sat by the window, she said gently, "Mr. Montgomery, do you ever regret what you did that day?" He looked at her with a warm smile. "Not for a second, Lily. You stole a loaf of bread, yes, but you gave me something far greater in return." She tilted her head. "What's that?" He smiled faintly, his voice soft. "You reminded me that kindness can turn a stranger into family." A tear slipped down Lily's cheek. She reached over and held his hand, their fingers tightening gently, the same way they had, all those years ago, in that quiet kitchen. When Ethan passed away peacefully the following spring, he left behind more than his wealth. In his will, a special note was written for Lily. "Greater than, for the girl who taught me compassion when I had forgotten what it meant to feel. Use this gift to share beauty with the world." He left her his estate's art studio, the same one where she had learned to paint. Years later, it became the Montgomery Art Center, a community place where children from poor neighborhoods could come and learn to draw, to create, to dream, all for free. And at the entrance, above the doorway, hung a simple plaque engraved with the words, "Kindness begins with a single act." Dash dash dash. Every morning, when the sun streamed through the studio windows, Lily would pause by that plaque and smile. Sometimes, she could almost hear his voice, calm, patient, and full of warmth. And in her heart, she knew that one small act of compassion, one decision to show mercy instead of anger, had changed not just her life, but his too. Because sometimes, the simplest act, feeding the hungry, forgiving the lost, becomes the most powerful story of all. Dash dash dash. Moral: when you choose kindness over judgment, you might just save two lives, the one you help, and your own.